Welcome to another episode of the Growth Focus podcast, where we bring together leaders and tech from all across the globe to share their time, their insights, and their expertise so that you can grow your business. My name is Gary Lafferty, your host and creator of the Growth Focus Partnerships, where we partner with tech leaders to help them grow away from the expert stage to the authority stage. So they're the ones that can be doing the choosing as opposed to the ones doing the chosen one. So without further ado, I can't wait for this episode's guest. Chris, why don't you start off by just introducing yourself and telling us who you are and what is it that you do?
Yeah, thanks, Gary. My name is Chris Clarke. I own and co-founded an agency originally based out of Los Angeles, but now it's moved to Austin, Texas, although we still have clients and people that work for us in LA. But our agency specializes in custom software development. And what I mean by that is we do, iOS apps, Android apps. We do e-commerce websites, any kind of feature-rich applications is what we really specialize on. We do some branding and do some, marketing, kind of in the social media space. But really our bread and butter is the technology side of things and really creating those, like I said, feature-rich websites and apps that people really enjoy using.
Oh, brilliant. We're going to dive a little bit into deeper into that as we get on with today. But just to dial it back a bit, tell us, how did you get started in this field?
Oh gosh, I've been working in technology since about 1997. Originally, I was in film and television production. I was a producer in the late 90s. And oddly enough, I worked for a production company in the Southeast, and they were, this is right when the website started coming out. And so they were like, oh, we need a website. So I was like, well, I can build that. So I just built him a website. And oddly enough, I don't know if you've heard of E-Entertainment out in LA. They had a television station, and they did a lot of really big shows at the time. Somehow, I don't know how, they saw that website, and then they brought me to LA for an interview. And then they wanted me to head up their web division, which they just started. And I was like, okay, that's cool. And so then I kind of shifted gears. I pivoted from being a producer to basically a web designer. And that's kind of how it all started. And I did that and worked for a lot of different agencies in Los Angeles. The first big one that I worked for was EMA. They were around for a long time, pretty much work with every studio that you can name off a list. And we did a lot of entertainment design stuff for them. We did like their websites, we did DVDs and Blu-rays, which were really popular at that time, interactive, CD-ROMs at the time. I mean, you're talking about some dating stuff. I mean, how old is this guy, So, but yeah, so I did that. And then I ran my own agency named Brain Soup in Los Angeles. And we had offices in Hollywood. We had an office in Pasadena. And from there, we just started kind of really following all the technology trends because the studios really demanded it. They were like, we have to be the first to do this. We have to be the first to do that. We have to one up all of our competition. And whether that was creating the next interactive, creating the next game that was on like a DVD or Blu-ray or even on a website, really trying to up that ante for the clients, and really kind of having to really stay on the razor edge of technology for a long time. And as you know, like web and apps, they outdate themselves pretty much every 6 to 8 months. And then there's something new out there. So you have to really be on top of it. But I did that and then did some consulting for a little bit after I sold off the agency, and which it ran for another 5 years, I think. And then, but then I basically was doing consulting for Fortune 500 companies in the tech areas and their web stuff. And really kind of refined my skills a little bit, and then came back around and we founded badpixel in 2020. So yeah.
So yeah, that is very much of a really powerful background to where you are today. Now, you did mention you've bought and sold agencies before. What is the biggest lesson, Chris, that you've brought to building this one that you got today?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. There's so much knowledge and so much things that you learn over time, especially coming from my roots of owning and operating agencies. I think the biggest thing that I could, if I could point to one thing that I think that is really operational refinement. You have to really know what you're doing on every level. And as a CEO, I have a partner who's the president, so we're on equal grounds, even though technically she owns 1% more than me. But some people will get that joke, some people won't. But anyway, so basically it's operational awareness. Understanding how an agency works is a little bit different than how some other service-based industries work, and they also tech companies work. So you could have worked at just like a startup, like a SaaS company, like where you're providing a software as a service to like your customer base. Well, that operationally functions similarly to an agency, but not really, because your customer base is different. You're looking at a client, a B2B model as opposed to a B2C model. And the things that we do internally have to be really tight, from project management to creating proposals to making sure we're scoping out the correct work, making sure the requirements are gathered from a person that's not in the same building with you. That's another thing that's different. You have to, pull people out of meetings in an agency world and get them to talk about, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve? What is it that we're trying to do for your software and for your experience? And if your operations internally are not really buttoned down, it's a nightmare. And a lot of people that I think start agencies and even freelancers go through this, because that's kind of the evolution of an agency, is kind of, starting out as one and then growing into many. And you have to grow that operational process. I can say right now, badpixel would not be as successful as it is today had we not had those failures back, when I had Brain Soup, and things like that. And also, even when I was a consultant for the Fortune 500 industry, our companies, you learn from that a lot. I think the company I worked for right before badpixel was a company called MedMen, and they were in Los Angeles. They were based in Los Angeles, but they were a national cannabis company. And I built their product design team. And I can tell you right now, they're even to this day, there's just stuff you learn. And you go, wow, we should do this better because this is not working. And, they always say fail fast and a lot of people go, why would you want to fail? It's like, well, if you fail, you identify a problem and then you can solve it. And you want to do that quickly so you can keep moving. But I think, that's a long-winded answer, but it's I think when you ask that, that's exactly what pops in my head is we couldn't run badpixel and manage 35 plus people and 10 plus clients without having that operational, awareness and those processes in place. So that's key.
Well, that's a really interesting point you said there, Chris, about failing fast. And you're absolutely right. Half the people will totally understand what we mean by fail fast, get back up, and go. The other half will be going, why would you want to fail? Failure means you're a failure. And I think at the end of the day, just because you failed in that endeavor doesn't make you the failure, doesn't make you any less of the entrepreneur. When it comes to failing and failing fast, what do you think are the key mindset shifts that you have to have? Because obviously, when you fail, it's going to hit you a little. It's going to hit you in various degrees. What mindset shifts did you have to go through that you could share with people here that says, actually, failing and failing fast is a good thing, and this is how you get on with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good point to make. And I think as you come up through your career, especially with me, I think one of the things that I had to do is exactly what you were just saying. Is like, don't take it personally. The failure in and of itself is not a reflection of a lack of attention to detail or a lack of effort or, any kind of like passion that you have for what you do and what you're creating. And I think one of the things that we can do is just say to our team, we're all going to fail. And that's just part of this industry and it's part of learning. It's how you deal with that failure that makes you successful. And that's what I would tell anybody. It's like, use those opportunities and you go, wow, we did all of these thought processes. We did all of this planning. We did all this stuff to create this version of this software. And then this one piece is not working like we thought it would. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. That's a problem to solve. We as creators, whether you're a designer or a developer or a project manager or a product manager, we're all there in it together. And one of the things that I think is really key is when you identify that we're all problem solvers. And that's where it gets fun. That's where my passion comes from. It's like, okay, there's a new problem to solve. Let's jump on that and let's solve that. Let's make it even better than the initial concept. Because this, but software development is really never ever complete. If anybody tells you it's one and done, they don't know what they're talking about. Software, websites, iOS apps, any kind of like desktop software, they iterate on it. That's why, if everybody out there that's watching, that's why you get new Apple software every year. That's why you get new Microsoft updates every 6 months or wherever. Microsoft's probably every other day, but I jest, but it's true. It's like that's why there is a new something. There's a new something to play with, to tap on. It's because they're iterating on a roadmap. So software starts here, but it can go forever. It just depends on how long the company is going to support that initiative. And so that's really kind of that. But sorry, I digressed a little bit. But that's kind of for the failure piece. That's key. Let's go get excited about the new challenge.
Yeah, and I love the way you put that. Get excited about the new challenge because I was talking to a client of mine earlier today, and what we were talking about is, like you just said there, software isn't just about iterating and becoming something new. It's also this constant need to break it and see what breaks and then improve upon on it. It's not, rather than waiting for it to break, because once you're waiting for it to break, it's too late. It's this
Yeah.
constant iteration of wait or pushing it to its very limit and then going, here's an update. So this doesn't actually happen. It's the new beginnings over and over again. And like you said, it's not personal. If you fail fast, you get back up again, and just treat yourself like a piece of software. Love that bit. So listen, so you're in a very competitive space, and I know we all think that what we do is very individual, and it is. But to the rest of the world out there, to new clients, to prospects out there, there is a danger of all sounding the same of what we do when it comes to deliverables and whatnot. So as you're in a competitive space, how are you standing out in a way that still works today?
That is an awesome, awesome question. I'm glad you asked me that, because that is something that any agency owner, I think, struggles with on a daily or weekly basis. What we did at Bad Pixel was, it's the way we approached the project, I think, that makes us a little bit more unique. Now, I'm sure there are agencies out there that do very similar approaches. I mean, because there is only so many ways that you can paint a canvas. There's only so many ways that you can do it, but there are creative ways that people haven't thought of yet. So our secret sauce, and there are some pitfalls in there that we can talk about later, but one of the things that we kind of identified early on, and this was in 2020, we started to pitch really large clients. We went from, and all of our business is based on referrals. That's how we started. I have a network of people that I talk to all the time that I've worked with. And one of the things that I noticed was, anybody can go to an agency and say, I want a website and it needs to do this, 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 and this. Okay. I want an app and it can do this, this, and this, and this. And you go, okay. So what we do is we go, okay, they gave us their requirements. They said, this is the website we want and this is the requirements. We say, well, what if you did something else? What if you did this, 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 and this? And then we show them a feature that they haven't even thought about. And we actually visualize it for them. And the proposal will actually show them what it could look like. And it's just a way of doing a mock-up of maybe what the new site would look like or the new app would look like. And then what we do is we do market research, not just in their industry, but in other industries that might have technology or features that they never considered, because they're like, well, we're an apparel brand, so why would we ever want to do this feature? Because that doesn't line up. And I'm like, well, it does line up, and here's how. And then we show them that thing. And an example of that would be, we had a client that they're like a Patagonia competitor, outdoors wear, active wear. And I was like, wouldn't it be cool if on your website people could go and buy something, but then there was notifications of hiking events, camping events, social events around their location. And it geolocates them either off the browser IP, or if you turn on locations, that's fine if you enable that, or off the app if you're on your phone. So if you're camping in Colorado and you got your phone with you and you have the app on, you were like, oh, I need me some new boots or something. And then it's like, hey, did you know there's a camping event 2 miles away from you? And so when you talk about stuff like that, then their eyes light up and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe that. We never even thought of that. And so that was our secret sauce. And kind of going to them and saying, we're not just an agency that's going to build you something most of them are. They're just like, yeah, I can do that. We're actually going to care about what your roadmap is going to be and how are you going to be a differentiator in your industry. And that's what we really started with.
So my question would be this: your road mapping that you do, and I think it's a great thing. You're almost future pacing for them, what it could be and whatnot. Is that more based upon client success, or is it a subtle form of marketing? Is it something else? How do you see it? Well, how did you come up with it, and then how do you actually see it?
Also, another amazing question, because one of the things that a lot of people that I've noticed don't do, even clients. We have clients that multi-million-dollar clients that basically don't know what a roadmap is. They're just like, we need a website or we need an app, or they don't think about the future. And so the way we put that together is, you have to look at it in a layer effect. When I explain this to the clients that we're going to do this, one of the things that I tell them, I was like, because obviously you can tell I'm a Star Wars fan. One of the things that I say, have you ever seen, I think it's called D3. It's where Disney comes out and they show you all of the TV shows that they're going to produce for a season. And then there's a long timeline, and then there's all the shows dropping. And I'm like, imagine those shows as versions of your app or your site. So think of it like that. Think of a timeline. And then what we do is we say, okay, what is the MVP, the most viable product or project? Some people say valuable, viable, whatever, however you want to say it. But what is the base level of features that you need to be successful today? And so we create that requirements list and that scope of work. And then we look at that based on the learning we've done for competitive analysis and market research, because those are going to inform all those requirements. And if you don't do those two things together, you're just going to, well, you're going to set up for failure. So, and not the good failure we talked about, the bad failure, because then the client's going to be like, well, why aren't we making money? And that's when you go, I don't really do my market research, So it's like, okay. So we start with that, and then we say, okay, well, basically we start with a giant feature list based on all that research and what the problems are that the company's trying to solve and what they're trying to achieve. What are those, KPIs that we need to meet, and the return on their investment. That's another piece that we could throw in there. And so what we do is we say, okay, if we had the dream website, it would do all of this stuff, or the dream app, it would do all of this stuff. And then we start going, okay, there's no way we can do that in 3 months or 6 months. The timeline now interferes and says, okay, and sometimes budget does, well, most of the time budget does too. They'll be like, oh, we can't spend that amount of money right now, but we can over time. And so then we start looking at how we space out and say, okay, well, this feature's nice, but it's not mission critical. So let's push that to phase 3. This one's not critical, so let's push that to phase 2. But it's a fast follow that we want to have because we really like it. So that's how those roadmaps start turning out. And it's worth mentioning that a roadmap is a living timeline. It's a living document. And so you could get to phase 2, and because of phase 1's learnings, because you're going to have learning during every phase that you're working on. Oh my gosh, we just had a client that we went through this with. It was awesome. But you learn certain things and you pivot on phase 1. So we pivoted on phase 1 for some of the feature sets because the client's like, well, what if we did this and what if we did that? And if you have a creative client, that's great, as long as they got a budget. Because who wants to work for free? And then so basically, then you get to phase 2, and now you have to retroactively look at what you did in phase 1 that wasn't part of the original planning and say, okay, now we got to bring phase 1 or phase 2 up to where that is, marry those two, and then from there, you create a new phase 2 scope of work and requirements. And then that happens, over time. It's basically called project grooming, where you get everybody in a room and you get your designers, your developers, your product managers, your project managers, however you have your setup going, and then you go through everything that you learned. It's called retrospective. You go through everything you learned in phase 1. And then once you go through that, and this is probably one of the most critical things that people need to do in a creative agency, is they go through what worked, what didn't work, what you would like to see improved upon, and any kind of really brutally honest feedback where there are communication breakdowns, from team member to team member, or from, vertical to vertical. And you got to go through all of that. And then that helps inform the next part of the roadmap, because it's not just about improving the software. It's about improving your team's effort. And if you've got people, your lead software developers and your lead designers, and they're not leading, or they're not communicating down, or even if I'm not communicating correctly, if the product team's not communicating correctly, you could do the most beautiful work in the world, but you're going to start losing really quality people because that roadmap process is not being followed correctly. And it's not being utilized to where it values not just the company and the client, it values the people that work within that system. And so that's really key. I think you gotta start with the people that you work with. It's not just about the numbers up here. It's got to be about where it starts,
That's a really, really good point. And there's not enough people that talk about for the people. In fact, in the last 24 hours, I've only had 2 people, including one is you, talk about the importance of your team, your people. Your clients are important, but it's also your people that's important as well. So that's really, really interesting. I want to talk about sales, because we talked a little bit about the pipeline and what's happened and stuff. You've told me before, when we've spoken before, that you're not the traditional sales guy, but you also understand we all have to do a degree of founder-led sales. So what's worked for you when it comes to founder-led sales or founder-led visibility?
That's interesting, because we're kind of coming out of Christmas and going in the holidays, whatever, respectfully people worship and celebrate. I think one of the things that we started seeing is we needed to because we just finished up a bunch of projects, and the clients that we work for were saying, okay, well, we got to get our budgets in order for Q1. So we're not going to kick off anything new until Q2. So we had this kind of gap from some of our fairly large clients. And we're like, well, we could backfill some of that. Let's see if we can go out and pull in some work. That way we have something to kind of, because another thing you don't want to do as an agency is have really talented people in your team, which we do have, and them going, got any work for me? It's like, not yet. So that's another thing to consider, is that work needs to be flowing in, like we're talking about sales. So for us, when we started, like I mentioned, that I had been doing a lot of consulting. I've been working in the industry in different industries for a long time. And this was like the 2009 timeline, 2010, 2011, around there, right after the economy jump started back again. And so I made a lot of connections in different places. Went through my list of contacts and said, "Hey, everybody, I've gone back and started another agency. Brain Soup is out of business, but badpixel is new. And I'm biased, stick with all these B names, but it works. And so I'm like, do you guys need any help from us, creatively?" Oddly enough, and you would not think this would be possible, but oddly enough, during COVID, we exploded because, and I think I likened it to one or two different variables. One of them was because COVID was happening and people were shutting down, like they're going to like basically a very lean model to run their business. Design teams, development teams, maybe got trimmed down like 80%. So they only had people to maintain what they had currently built, but they didn't have anybody to build more. They didn't have a team anymore. They all got laid off or furloughed or whatever it was. And so when I knocked on their door and said, "Hey, we have a whole team here. We can build or design or develop whatever you want," then the lights turned on. Everything was just booming. And so that was kind of luck, to be honest with you. I mean, I just threw a dart at the wall and see if I hit something. And I was like, it can't hurt to ask. Why not? But then we got into like this. We tried to do like, you've heard of Zoom Info, the email marketing platform. I'm going to be very political about this. I felt like it wasn't effective for us. And that's probably a us problem because that's not our forte. I can write the best emails in the world. I can write copy. I'm creative. So it's not hard for me to write you a nice email that you're going, "Oh, this is interesting. Let me check this out." The problem is oversaturation of the market. So you get like all these agencies and all these companies. And I mean, I can tell you right now, I'm sure you do as well. I get 1,000 emails a day from other people wanting to sell me something. And it's all through some kind of email marketing platform. I don't want to just pick on Zoom Info, but the thing is that I didn't find it effective. Thousands of emails sent, we netted one client. So the ratio there, the ROI was not there for us. We were just like, this is way too expensive and it's not returning that. So other avenues that we've been exploring, which is great, is obviously, I think being kind of we're going to be opening up our blog section of our website where we're going to have articles that myself, my other co-founder has written, some of our designers have written, our developers have written. We want to make sure everybody has a voice here. And as long as it's not offensive, I don't mind them posting. Also, podcasts like yours, I think is very effective in getting like who you are out there. I think people want to see a human face to a digital experience. Sometimes when they're like, "Well, I don't know what a bad pixel is. And I don't know, what that, I don't know what it is, and so they want to see the face behind the brand, or one of the faces because I'm a co-founder. But so those are some avenues that we were exploring. Also, all of our clients, we always ask them, "Hey, can you refer business to us if you really enjoyed the experience with us?" And this really getting out there and kind of being a little bit, loud about everything, like what we've done, but not in a way that's obnoxious. We don't want to be out there just banging the drum to bang a drum. It's like, okay, do you have something to say? Then yeah, we'll go out there. But that's really kind of where we've kind of landed. Also, my partner and I, we're the members of the Austin Chamber of Commerce. So we go to all the Chamber of Commerce meetings, where you get to schmooze with all the people locally. Fortunately and unfortunately, Austin is a home to a lot of agencies. So I'm like, "Hi, I own an agency." And they're like, "So do I." You're handing your business cards to them. It's like, but we made a lot of great connections and great friends here through that and a lot of great experiences. So and another agency owner who I'm really good friends with, his name's Brady Patterson. One of the things he was always saying is go to these meetups, like where you're, like the technology meetups and design meetups, and just go to those and just socialize. And that's another way you can do it. And I think it's something that a lot of people just don't think about, but that human interaction, I think, is really key.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today, in a world where we've automated almost everything, what we're seeing more and more and more over the course of the last 6 months, maybe even 9 months, is that people want to have that relationship back again. They want to shake the hand. They want to look you in the eye. They, as you say, they want to put the face in front of the digital face. And that's becoming more and more important in order to stand out, because a lot of people are, hiding is probably one of the words, but, for sake of another word, they are hiding behind an email. And it's really when you're getting bombarded with emails, then you're just not being seen. You're not being seen. You're not being heard. You're just in the
Mhm.
trash can with everybody else, right? And that's the key thing. So that being said, I've got this loaded question as your last question. If you could go back and give, with all your experience, Chris, that you've had through all of the agencies and the businesses and the consultancies that we've done, if you could give young Chris a word of advice on being successful, what would that word be?
Oh my God. One word or just
No,
like
no,
that?
no. It's just what would it be if you had to give young Chris some advice?
Wow. Missed opportunities. Don't miss them. In other words, I think, because I am, I'm 50 years old. So I'm, in my midlife and all the experience I've had up to now, you have that ability and that wisdom to look backwards and say, I should have done this. I should have done that. I should have done this. But they were so obviously there and glaring that I would tell myself, I would say, always look at it from a different perspective. Like look at these opportunities from a different perspective. One of the biggest ones would be growth. Like growing Brain Soup was painful. It took forever. We started out with 15 people, I think. No, we started out with 3 people and grew it to 15. And then from there, it went all the way up to almost like 40, 50. And so I think what I would tell myself is you could have easily accomplished that if you had done a certain amount of like when you get the wins in a project, when you go, okay, the client's happy and they're like, God, this is great. That's when you pounce and you say, okay, not in a bad way, in a good way. Well, if you love that, we can do this, this, and this. And always have options for your clients and say, well, we could do this and this. Now, this is going to be a little bit more expensive and this is going to be a little bit more time, but look at what we could possibly achieve and what the ROI on that would be. Look what you could gain in momentum, gain in viewership, and gain in, adaptation or adoption or, rates and things like that. I think it's one of those things that I would say that probably was my weakest quality as a young Chris, because I know it probably doesn't seem like it here, and wisdom and age being the factor here. Like when I was 21, 22, 23, all the way up into my mid 20s, I wasn't as confident as I am now. And that's shocking. I mean, maybe I was in a social setting, but not in a business setting. So I think a lot of people, and I'm guilty of this too, even to this day, because some of our clients are kind of semi-famous or famous. And so I get into a call with them and you get a little bit of nerves. It's like, okay, well, this person's accomplished a lot and I've accomplished a lot, but it makes you nervous. And I think that another thing I would tell myself is don't be nervous. Everybody's human. They're not going to jump through the screen and bite you or, and don't worry about like, you're not trying to win their affection. You're trying to win their business. And by having that confidence and having those, your homework done, making sure you know what you're talking about, making sure that when you are upsailing from a success point, that it's a no brainer for them. They go, okay, yeah, that sounds great. And I have adopted that as I've gotten older, and it works. It works perfectly. I mean, as soon as you have a win, you want to give them another win. Say, okay, we did this. This is great. Let me get another win for you, which is a win for us as well. So, you're not trying to manipulate anybody. You're just trying to keep that success train going. You want to keep that roadmap going. And so that's the thing that I think for me as a young Chris was to have good confidence, understand your industry, do daily research. You want to be on all kinds of websites reading about, whatever the rags are that you're reading, whether it's Smashing Magazine or some kind of, if you're a designer or UI UX designer, or if it's any other kind of, I would say, credible source that talks about your industry. And also, I would say ancillary industries as well. So if you're a designer, read about the, product design world with UI and UX and digital, designs. And then you can also read about the development of those designs because you want to be able to understand those things. So I would say, do your research, make sure you understand your industry, make sure that you can answer questions, make sure you have the confidence that you feel when, as a professional. And I think that if you do those first 3 things, the fourth one it's a no brainer because it comes into your mind. And you're like, and if they start asking you questions in a meeting, you can answer them. And if you don't be afraid to say, I don't know. Let me go check on that. Let me go find out, or let me go ask my developers, or let me go ask my designers. Don't be afraid to not know, but also come prepared. So, and I think that as a young Chris, that was something, coming out of college, going into like the professional industry immediately. And especially in a market like Los Angeles, it's intimidating. It really is, but it makes you grow up fast. So yeah, but that's really what I would say.
But that's a brilliant place to end this interview on. It's been a great piece of advice there. So if people want to get hold of you, potentially work for you, or what's the best way of doing that?
I would just say go through our website, badpixel.com. There's a schedule a meeting, and it basically will put a meeting on my calendar. We had it going to somebody else's, but he decided he wanted to go do something else, which was great for him, very happy for him. But now it comes directly to me until we fulfill that role in another way. But if you want to get to know me or have a project to talk about, or also I'm open to things like this, like podcasts like this as well. I think it's important for us to keep the conversation going and keep evolving as agencies, as creative professionals and developers and things like that. So I'm open to both as long as it's not you trying to sell me insurance. I'll be happy.
Yeah, well, I'll make sure that your links are in the show notes so people can just do a one click and get straight through you. Well, Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for your time and your insights today.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's been a pleasure, and I'm happy to come back anytime. I love talking. You can tell I like to talk, so you know.
Yeah, well, no, let's make that a part two. We'll get you back for a part two. So thank you
That's
very
right.
much, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us for yet another episode of the Growth Focus podcast. And as usual, if you have taken one piece of insight, one piece of nugget from Chris today, please make sure you like it. Please make sure you comment so other people can see what you've learned from that, and perhaps it helps them. But more importantly, please share. Hit that share button so that other people can learn and can grow as well. So until next time, keep striving, keep working hard, but more importantly, please be profitable. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.